Hello, and welcome to episode number 68 of the LSR Podcast. My name is Matt Brown, joined each and every week by the brightest minds in all of the gaming industry. With me, I have Dustin Gowker. I have Adam Candy. If you'd like to follow those fine fellows over there on the Twitter machine, at Adam Candy, that is 2 E's, no Y, at Dustin Gowker. You can follow the main account at LSP Report as well. Interesting news coming out all over the place in the sports betting world this week. Very happy to report that for you guys. And then also we got some numbers because that's what we talk about here on this podcast. We love to talk about numbers, but let's kick things off here, Dustin, with the real big story that kind of, again, one of those deals that just casually kind of dropped. We didn't really have any sort of hint that this was coming down the pipe here. I mean, we've heard that there were partnership deals that have gotten really close, but never quite got there. And then PointsBet dropped kind of a bomb to us on the afternoon.
Yeah, we got PointsBet. We've always taken a close look at all these media deals that go out there with the world, and this is one of the big ones that was left was NBC. There was no dance partner for NBC. PointsBet drops the news along with NBC that they did a multi-year partnership with NBC Universal, making them the official sports betting partner of all the NBC properties. Part of this deal, NBC gets some equity in PointsBet, which is, as we know, an Australian-based online gambling company that has big designs on the U.S. market. And PointsBet also committed to hundreds of millions of dollars of advertising spend over the life of this deal that can be offset in terms of some of the equity that NBC gets if the share price goes up for PointsBet. So interesting deal. And again, one of the last dance partners out there. Details, NBCSN is part of this. Golf Channel is a part of it. The 8 NBC regional sports networks some of those are in states already with sports betting. Some are in future states, but a lot of exposure for PointsBet, which really is trying to make the deficit in brand exposure with likes of FanDuel and DraftKings and MGM a little smaller.
So, Adam, we kind of take a look at this, and when this dropped and you see kind of like the headline that came through and the dollar figure that was attached to it, we all kind of took a step back and said, wow, that is a very, very large number that is attached to that. Now, as we kind of dug in a little bit further, we did realize that maybe, if some of these obligations can't be met as far as from a monetary standpoint, that equity would be involved with different things like that. But even still, where is all this money coming from? I mean, you kind of look at a company in PointsBet, if you went and took a look as this announcement was coming out, a market cap of like $845 million. And we're talking about a $500 million partnership here with NBC. So yeah, where's all the dollars coming from here?
From Allen Iverson's pocket, maybe from their pitch man. I'm not sure. That's really the question when it comes to this PointsBet deal. Go back to their Q2 results, in which PointsBet showed roughly $70 million in cash on hand. And then compare that to DraftKings and FanDuel, who are both rocking $1 billion when it comes to marketing cash. Now, are they going to spend as much as DraftKings or FanDuel? No. And they've said as much. But, we've heard from some within the PointsBet organization that the amount that's wrapped up in that deal with NBC might not even be half of what they might spend in advertising on an annualized basis. So I'm still wondering where the cash is going to come from. Credit Suisse put out a report out of Australia just last month in which they said, looking at PointsBet, they see a need for an additional cash infusion along the way here. Now, does that go for a lot of the operators in the U.S.? Yeah, absolutely. But we've seen where it comes from, right? FanDuel, DraftKings, Roar being GVC and MGM. So we've seen where all those cash infusions come from. So it'll be really interesting to see how this deal plays out in the long term for NBC and PointsBet. On the surface, it looks like NBC got a decent deal.
All right, Dustin. So let's take a look here and break things down for the people that have been following along. We know Penn National, a big investment into Barstool Sports. We know that ESPN has a deal with Caesars. We know that FanDuel and Fox obviously got married, so they have that going on there as well. They even own their own networks as far as TVG and different things like that go. Where is the major media, MGM with Yahoo? So where are the major media deals? Are there any major media deals left to be had out there?
think you missed CBS Sports and William Hill. Maybe you said that.
Yeah.
It was such a long list that it's getting hard to figure out what is out there. And this is obviously what people want to do. All these have been snatched up basically in the last year. ESPN Caesars is pretty early, but yeah, we're looking at basically web portfolios now of, there's not really a whole lot out there. NBC is part of the Comcast portfolio. So we're looking, Bleacher Report even has this deal with Caesars. You're looking, you look at a little smaller, SB Nation, I guess, and FanSide. These are huge regional and network of blogs around the country that would be interesting. Maybe there's something to be done there. Sports Illustrated's indicated its interest. I don't know how successful that will be, but in terms of stuff that's really going to make a splash, I think, I don't know, maybe I'm missing something, but it feels like the last big dance partner out there. And you guys can correct me if you think there's something out there that we're missing that would move the needle for anyone.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I mean, we were kind of breaking this down even months ago, whenever pretty much after the Penn deal was struck with Barstool, Adam, we were kind of trying to figure out somewhere along the way. We're like, okay, what's the next big thing that could happen? We did mention NBC, weren't really sure how that was all going to play out here. Now we see them go with a PointsBet. And I think some people out there, maybe who haven't been following along in the industry, maybe as close as we have, might look at a PointsBet and say like, NBC, major entity out there going with a PointsBet. But I mean, when in the grand scheme of things here, with a lot of the money that is due to NBC that could be coming from, affiliate deals, could be coming from signups and whatnot. If we look at market penetration, maybe that's what they were thinking somewhere along the way, right? That maybe PointsBet didn't quite have the market penetration and the saturation that some of these other ones did, and there was at least some upside there from a financial standpoint.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, Matt, in that they're biting at this apple from multiple directions, right? You talk about the affiliate, you talk about the fact that it's a 4.9% max stake, right? So that means that you just missed that 5% operator threshold that otherwise NBC would be subject to. So NBC has a lot of ways to come at this in which they can make money, not the least of which is that equity stake that they're looking at down the line. So it's a smart deal in that they covered themselves a lot of different ways depending on what PointsBet's level of success looks like. And we know that PointsBet has talked very openly about wanting a 10% market share nationally. Of course, that's what we've heard from any number of operators when it comes to fighting for that number 3 spot behind FanDuel and DraftKings. In terms of what's left out there at this point, really, unless you're going to start to talk about a Turner Bleacher Report situation, there's not really anything obvious out there that that's still left to do, short of the great whale of ESPN deciding if it really wanted to get into this with both feet.
Yeah, because that Caesars deal is still it's not easy to see that.
Right.
They talk about it on the Daily Wager. They have lines. It's not in your face like any of these other deals. And I think it's worth pointing out too, FanDuel in all of this has been, not doing these overarching deals. They've had at least a handful of these influencer deals. They signed Pat McAfee. They signed Worldwide Wob, Rob Perez, who's known as an influencer in the NBA space. You've got Just Today, Cousin Sal, who's known from the Jimmy Kimmel Show and from his sports betting hijinks on the Fox Bet show that's on Fox Sports. So there's another way to get into the media game that's maybe not as obvious, but you can sign these deals until the cows come home and continue adding to your exposure.
I think one of the things that you said when you were kind of running down the nuts and bolts of everything here, Dustin, is one of the interesting things that steps out to me, and I think this is something that we've talked about on this podcast, numerous times here, but you getting access to the Golf Channel through this, I think for PointsBet is pretty big. I mean, we have heard about the ratings increase for golf over the course of the COVID-19 pandemic here. We have heard about how actually the biggest problem with golf for the longest time was they were not attracting younger people. The crowd was just getting older and older and older and older, and the viewers were just getting older and older and older. We've now seen there's now a spike in younger viewership and all of that. And so, Adam, you kind of look at that and you say, okay, if we're bullish on golf betting long term for them to have a deal where, the opening rounds of nearly every single tournament are being aired on this channel right here, I think that that's a pretty interesting part of this whole deal that might, doesn't really get all the headlines, but being able to be a part of that niche and that growing segment of the sports betting landscape could be big for PointsBet.
I think what's interesting about what you say there, Matt, is that I would like to see what the demos look like for NBC Sports and for the Golf Channel in specific when it comes to trying to draw in those younger viewers, right? Because I think you're still probably looking at a pretty decent fragmentation of the audience where you would be looking to acquire that younger demographic for Golf Channel rather than trying to monetize something that's already there. I will just say anecdotally, from looking at social media, my social media has been far more excited about golf over the last 2 months than it ever had been before when it comes to the betting angle. I mean, when Dustin Johnson and John Rahm were dueling putts from the surface of the moon the other day, it felt like I couldn't go, 3 tweets without seeing something about it on that Sunday. So yes, the younger audience is out there. I think it also goes along with in-play and just how well golf can continue to monetize the in-play products, because that really is where the growth potential is, being able to get people interested in golf in chunks, in hour and 2 hours at a time, versus trying to hold on to them for a 5-hour TV event.
And worth noting, PointsBet just became an official betting partner of the PGA Tour too. Perhaps not shocking given this Golf Channel development, but yeah, that's if you're gonna invest in something that's that's an interesting vertical to be putting more worth money into.
If you've been with us for the last couple of weeks, you guys know all of the stuff that has been going on up in Illinois. Very quick recap. You can sign up mobily. There is a date on that until September the 19th. Will that get extended? We shall see. However, Adam, when we look here, the last time we did talk, we were saying, well, the biggest beneficiary here is DraftKings because they are already going. We do have people joining DraftKings now there in Illinois, at least for this 2-week sprint that we have going on.
The 2-week sprint, which of course includes the beginning of NFL season, always the most fruitful time for customer acquisition, at least in the young U.S. sports betting market that we've seen thus far. FanDuel is in at Paradise Casino. PointsBet's not far behind. They put it out on their social media that even though their retail location was already up and running, that they'll have the app going as well via their deal with Hawthorne Racecourse. These deals are more interesting in terms of what they mean, I think, for Rivers and for PointsBet, because we already know that FanDuel and DraftKings getting in and having remote registration is a huge deal for them. I'm really curious to see how PointsBet and Rivers hold up through this, because they were the ones looking at market advantages that did not include remote registration. Rivers obviously having a huge footprint in Illinois, and PointsBet getting a location on the outskirts of downtown Chicago. So how does this shape up for them when they don't have the ability to do the marketing blitz that FanDuel and DraftKings do? That's what remains to be seen. On a personal note, these stories that popped up about FanDuel and PointsBet did not include anyone calling anyone else a corrupt idiot, and I found them much less interesting.
I would agree. We do like that here on the podcast. You mentioned the marketing blitz here. Actually, if you're listening to this and you live in Illinois, I would actually like to know, at Matt Brown M2 over on Twitter, copy Dustin, copy Adam, but what has it been like, and what is it going to look like over the course of the next week? I'm very, very curious about that. We know about what went on in the heyday of DFS that is very well documented, but knowing that there is only this, as we sit right now, is 16 days left, technically, we could see that extended. But Dustin, I actually am pretty interested to see what these 16 days are going to look like in Illinois. Is every third commercial that you're going to see during some sort of broadcast about one of these sports books? I mean, if you're DraftKings and FanDuel, and when PointsBet comes online here shortly, I mean, maybe you're doing that. I would have a hard time blaming them, probably.
Yeah, I don't know. We don't know exactly what DraftKings was doing, but you have to imagine when they thought they were up and live the first time and getting ready to go to remote registration, then it got peeled back. You have to imagine they had a big ad buy lined up, maybe already signed. They may have then canceled that ad buy, and now maybe they had to go back and say, oh, just a second, we want for at least a few weeks, we want to buy a bunch of commercials. I mean, I'm sure nobody's turning down this money, but it was interesting / funny because they're doing this dance where they had to deal with, okay, what is, it's not worth it anymore without the remote registration. So we know in Colorado, Indiana, even the existing markets of New Jersey and Pennsylvania, that there are a lot of commercials for definitely FanDuel, DraftKings, and MGM, and you got to imagine it's going to be the same for anybody who's live in Illinois.
Yeah, for sure.
I would say also, Matt, that when you look to other states, for an example, let's take New Jersey. I watch a lot of the New York Yankees broadcast on the Yes Network. And, of course, they're pitching to the New York market to get people into New Jersey. DraftKings not only sponsors the Yankees pregame show, it is the DraftKings Yankees pregame show on Yes. I recorded this the other day. They had a 60-second activation in program. It was not an ad. It was actually right with Bob Lorenz, the host, leading right into it, where they put the odds up on the screen for the Rays-Yankees game and had a voiceover read through them. So you can't get away from it right now in certain states. And, we have a story on one of our sister sites at Play Colorado talking about what it's like in Colorado right now. The blitz is strong elsewhere. And if Illinois looks anything else like it, then I think you can expect to see a lot.
Yeah.
I think they still do these too, Matt. They do. There's sportsbook infomercials, and I remember 2015, 2016. There were definitely DraftKings infomercials,
yes,
like half hour things where you just like, here's how you play at DraftKings. Like, I assume there's some late night television with that too. I haven't seen them yet, but
I sent you guys one a few months ago. I was on a Southwest flight. I was on a Southwest flight, and they pick up the channels from New York. And it was a DraftKings infomercial. It was a half-hour DraftKings infomercial. I sat there. I mean, this was on my Christmas vacation. I thought, I can't get away from this stuff.
So infomercials must work with somebody, I guess.
Yeah, I
guess.
There's got to be market research for sure. If you're in Chicago, seriously, hit me up on Twitter. Let me know what it's been like, because I am very, very curious as to how that media thing is going up there, especially billboards, whatever you might see, buses, all that stuff. Let me know. Dustin, let's talk about what I actually consider, and I'm not speaking in hyperbole here, and I'm not actually being facetious at all. I think this is one of the bigger stories to come out in all of this in quite some time. DraftKings hits with a pretty big bombshell.
And, it makes a good headline. Michael Jordan becomes a special advisor to the board of directors of DraftKings. That's a big headline with a big name, obviously. What exactly he'll be doing, I'm not sure that's terribly clear, but he will be, he is a gambler. So he obviously has some insight into what DraftKings might do. He has some business acumen. There is obviously some question about his business acumen in terms of running an NBA franchise, but it's a headline grabbing thing and gets you out there. And I think, as you said privately, like, legitimizes DraftKings more. Like, here's the, arguably the greatest player of all time, the NBA, saying, here, go play at draft. I mean, we're not going to be doing commercials maybe necessarily, but who knows what that holds. But, he's putting his name on the DraftKings brand. That holds some cachet. We saw in pre-market trading, DraftKings is up 15%, which seems mildly crazy. It's not quite up as much anymore, but it is very interesting. And Jordan gets some equity in DraftKings. We have no idea how much, probably not a ton, but it's the whole thing is interesting, and it does serve to legitimize sports betting a little bit more in the United States.
And Adam, I mean, this is a guy here we understand. Of anyone in the entire world, we understand, as far as a pitch man goes and moving product and all the things like that. You do have to wonder what goes into this deal with Jordan here, and if we're going to see him, even if it's just his face on a print ad, right? I mean, even if it's not, full-fledged in a commercial, even if it's not whatever. I mean, if you see Michael Jordan, who is the most easily recognizable athlete in the world, it does not matter where you are, everybody knows who Michael Jordan is. If you see his face on an ad next to the DraftKings logo, to me, that is actually one of the biggest things that has happened in this industry. And I know I'm not trying to overblow this, but we've seen what this guy can do for brands. We've seen how this guy moves the needle. they put out a documentary about this guy's life after, a decade after he's retired. It was the hottest thing that was on television. He still resonates with everybody.
Am I going to have to be pump the brakes guy here? I feel like I might have to be pump the brakes guy here.
Let's do it.
I understand exactly what you mean about the Jordan brand. I'm curious how that translates over into anything where he would be a pitchman, unless he is going to truly jump in on this. If he were to be out there acknowledging his gambling past and talking about, DraftKings, and either doing it tongue in cheek or in some way, tacitly acknowledging that, I'm just going to make something up and say, hey, I wish the DraftKings had been around when I was playing, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like something that really takes advantage of the aura of Michael Jordan, because I look at, all right, obviously Charles Barkley does not have the brand that Michael Jordan does, but he is a hugely recognizable name for the U.S. sports betting market. And, Dr. Aftkings feels like a long time ago from when Charles Barkley was first in on this. So I think it could be a big thing. Don't get me wrong. I agree with you that it is significant. I'm not thinking that it has the potential to move the needle, only because I don't think Michael Jordan is going to jump in, to use something I already said, with both feet on this.
Yeah, no, definitely. It certainly, my enthusiasm towards this and how effective it could be definitely is contingent on how much he is willing to put in behind it. And of course, Dustin, you said we don't know how much the equity is. That probably comes down to how much skin in the game he's got as to how much he wants to be, behind it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was going to say that, like, if he has a significant stock position in DraftKings now, like, he probably becomes more willing to do things that do that. Again, the actual deal is like company strategy, product development, marketing activities. That doesn't say anything specifically about him being a pitchman. I agree with Adam. Like, let's wait until we see that actually manifest itself. But yes, if we have Michael Jordan DraftKings commercials, like then I think we're talking about something that's interesting. We just don't know that at this time. And yeah, it's supposed to be like he's providing business insight. Again, I think more than a business site, just putting his name on the brand and saying, hey, DraftKings is a legit business. I'm giving it beyond this brand and pitchman. He's like, this is a business I'm putting myself behind.
I'll put it this way. If there was anything at all about him being in any sort of ads, they have 16 days to sign up people in Chicago. I imagine that he is going to be a part of something if there's any chance in the world that it could be, on the table or something. So I imagine we'll find out pretty quick if that could be the case at all. Adam, let's talk about their competitor, their main rival here in FanDuel, and let's head up to the great state of Colorado.
This story was broken by our Matthew Waters of a bettor in Colorado who thinks he might have found a little loophole in the rules. We've heard of a couple of PALP situations in Colorado, excuse me, I should say with FanDuel, not in Colorado. But these PALP situations have brought a bit of negative light on FanDuel. In this case, without getting into the specifics, this guy found a way to bet hockey in which there was almost no way to lose, and ended up in some negotiation with FanDuel over whether or not he was going to be paid out on these bets. This looked like it was going to go to Colorado regulators. Eventually, they did reach a settlement for a significant amount of what he would have made, a little more than $12,000 ends up getting in the settlement. It's less about a $12,000 settlement in Colorado and more about the fact that FanDuel seems to have found a way to have its name in the light on this 3 consecutive times that other operators have not had. Now, does it mean that other things haven't happened? No, obviously not. The whole DraftKings national championship situation was, its own mess for DraftKings. But I found it interesting that FanDuel ultimately chose to settle this one when they've had a couple that they've let go on to regulators to sort of set some precedent.
Dustin, as we kind of continue in it's inevitable that we're going to talk about the stock prices of these companies because, hey, look, they're the hot, sexy thing right now as sports betting continues to sweep across the nation here. We enter new states. I mean, it's showing up on mainstream programming. I saw a clip from CNBC just on Monday where they were talking about the sports betting stocks and stuff where, I mean, wasn't even like what we're talking about. It wasn't even an infomercial. They didn't have like any specific person on there to kind of pump up their brand. It was literally just them sitting around talking about sports betting stocks. And so you're going to have people continue to weigh in here. And one guy seems to be pretty bullish on the old Penn stock.
Yeah, a little bit more bullish than even anybody else, even perhaps El Presidente Portnoy, who put a $100 target on Penn National stock thanks to its relationship with Barstool. He didn't put a target of $200, but saw a path to a $200 stock price for Penn National. Let's put some context to that. It's $58 right now. It was $4 4 months ago at the bottom of the pandemic, when Penn National was forced to close almost all of its casinos, or I think probably all of them. So this is a pretty wild projection for what's going on. It's so interesting to me is that basically the entire stock price of Penn National is now tied up in what Barstool Sportsbook will be something that doesn't even exist yet in the wild. There is no Barstool Sportsbook app that anybody can play on. It's supposed to come to Pennsylvania here in the near future, and then other states in Q1. But like Penn National, it's like doesn't even matter if it runs casinos apparently anymore or what those do. It's like Barstool Sportsbook. Everybody's like, let's do that, and we're buying and advising buying because of that. So really interesting dynamic. Obviously, the stock market is a little wonky right now and not always tied up in reality, but who knows? Maybe it gets there.
Yeah, I mean, Adam, I think there's the people out there, if there are any naysayers, just continue to say, okay, look, yeah, we're at where we're at right now. The worst really hasn't even hit us yet. I mean, we're still talking about, there's been all kinds of delays on foreclosures and delays on rent payments and things like that or whatever. The stimulus was still there for the longest amount of time. The worst really hadn't hit yet. So you kind of look at this, but if we do look historically, gaming has always bounced back pretty solidly. Now, we don't have history on sports betting. We don't have a long history on internet sports betting for sure. But I think a lot of people are probably just kind of equating this to how gaming has traditionally rallied back after kind of bad times in the U.S. and really kind of we're seeing it across the board, right? I mean, all the stocks are going crazy from where we were 4 months ago. We were talking about this on this very podcast, and everything had just completely bottomed out. And since then, it's been on this rocket ship.
I think we need to be a little cautious in terms of talking about gaming as a monolith, because Penn National has a different type of footprint than, say, Wynn, right? Just to pick a name out of a hat, because Penn National is operating in 19 states, and they have significant overhead involved with a number of physical casinos that they have to deal with. So my question for anyone who's putting that huge of a target on Penn is, where do you see that regional gaming business going in the next 5 to 10 years? As you said, Matt, it would seem from a number of indicators that we have not seen even the beginning of what the economic fallout will be from the coronavirus pandemic. And, gaming does tend to lag that. Now, gaming, again, not to speak of it as a monolith, gaming that requires travel tends to lag that. That's why Las Vegas usually is a few months to a year or so behind what happens in the rest of the country. When it's regional, it's around the corner, and people still are looking for that outlet or that vice, then yeah, maybe it doesn't take quite the same hit. I just think there's definitely a rose-colored glasses feel to a target even of $75, but the idea of $200, please tell me who's taking that action. I will put all I have. Give me a limit bet on under 200.
I would also, again, in my very, very short stock market days here, which stretches back all of 4 months, whenever I just looked and was basically like, oh, these are all basically free. These stocks are free at this point. 200 seems pretty incredible here. And you mentioned one of the things that they have to deal with that we're not really talking about when we talk about the DraftKings and the PointsBets and the FanDuels of the world and stuff like that, is they have actual real overhead physical casinos. I mean, they own and operate currently the Tropicana here in Las Vegas that is still not opened as of yet. They were going to open it. They pushed that back even further because of how things are going. So I think you are right on there that when we look at this, we can't necessarily just lump all these companies completely together, because while they are in the same business, they don't function or operate the same. And Dustin, I think that that's kind of like something that we can at least try to explain along the way. And we'll try to point that out as we continue with these podcasts that, like while they are all in the sports betting game and they all certainly are in the sports betting business, they don't operate from the ground up the same.
Yeah, and Penn National make no mistake about it, Penn National needs the casinos to come back to full capacity or something verging on that at some point in the future. Else the business model is upside down. It doesn't make any sense. Because you read like this analyst report and it talks about the land-based casino, but it's pretty agnostic on what the land-based casino business does in terms of whether it makes a difference. It's all about Barstool Sportsbook. It's, base case, it says 15 to 20% share of U.S. sports betting in an online casino in the U.S. Is that possible? Sure, I guess. It says customer acquisition costs are going to be way lower because you're just going to convert stoolies to sportsbooks. But Dave Portnoy's going to snap his fingers. Everybody's going to go sign up sportsbook app. Is that going to happen? Maybe. These are base cases that are being presented for buying now. Let alone like to get to the $200 bull case. It's like, you have to just destroy everybody at everything you're doing, and you'd have to have the regional casino business take off. It all just, I don't know. We say we're not stock analysts. We end up analyzing stock all the time. I look at this and I'm like, it just doesn't make any sense. And it's all based on a lot of assumptions that, if you're good for you, if you're right down the road, but God only knows right now.
We'll be launching legal stock report just down the line.
We own that domain, right?
I do own that. After we said it on the podcast that day, I was like, I think I'm going to go pick up that domain, and I did go and pick up that domain. So it'll be launched down the line here. Speaking of with this whole thing and Barstool and saying, okay, well, snap your fingers, everyone's just going to sign up and do. I think this is kind of proving that maybe that isn't necessarily the case here, Adam. Whenever we look at the disaster that has been Intralot.
Well, Intralot does get a special place in sports betting hell. I think we need to be fair to those we're talking about when it comes to Penn National and Barstool, at least say that with Penn National, there is some demonstrated success in the gaming space. Intralot's run some lotteries, and it's done a really, really bad job with sports betting. We have some initial results on handle from both Montana and from Washington, D.C. The good news is that since inception, you're looking at roughly an 18% hold in Washington, D.C. And hey, that's what Intralot promised when it hoodwinked the D.C. Council into a single operator deal through the lottery. The bad news is it's like 18% of nothing, because 18% of nothing is still nothing. You had less than $1 million wagered.
Yeah, and let's remember, this was the path to making lots of money in DC, was holding lots of money. But this is what we've been saying all along, right? Is that if you're holding 18 to 20% or whatever, or 30% of nothing, right? Yeah, you've ended up with nothing almost.
That is exactly right. And when it comes to the situation with Intralot, look, you can't continue to exploit bettors the way that they are trying to exploit bettors and have anybody take you seriously. Because what you're seeing is people just are not adopting the product. You can't make money if people don't adopt the product. Duh. And Intralot is asking people, if your typical game has minus 110 sides and Intralot is showing up with minus 130 sides on both sides, then you're talking about a product that even the least experienced bettor can look at when they look at the potential payout and say, I'm not going to make anything on this. I mean, Intralot's product really does feel like a collaboration between, Bovada and Oddshark to take all of the offshore market and keep it right in the offshore market by making the legal market look bad.
Man, that's a great idea. Is Intralot just a shell company for an offshore site? That would be brilliant.
Hey, you heard it here first.
Listen, yeah, let's dig in, because honestly, it is insanity, and it seems like it does not matter, because we're not the only people who continue to bring this to light as to how poorly this is getting run. I have now seen a dozen plus different outlets come out and say, like, how in the world are they actually doing this? And they do not care. They continue to roll out these horrible odds over and over and over again. So yeah, it makes you wonder, like, who is pulling the strings here? Who is running this? Who is giving the go ahead and say, like, Yeah, go ahead and put out the absolute worst lines that anyone's ever seen ever in the history of ever. So yeah, just go ahead and do that.
And it's funny. I lived in DC for a long time. I have some friends who like dork around on the app, and it's they've been sport bettors in the past, and they look at the lines and they know are bad. Interestingly, golf always seems to be good. I have no idea why they're not ripping people on golf, because it's way easier to hide the vig in golf than it is anywhere else. But the golf odds, these usually compete pretty well with offshore and the legal sports book. So it's interesting. And I'm going to add something to the agenda quickly while we're talking about sports betting monopolies. And I know some people at DraftKings and or SP Tech sometimes listen to this podcast. My app in Oregon is absolute garbage since you updated it. I can't even log in to the site to place bets. If I do, the bet disappears. Somebody help me. I just want to lose my money to you. I'm trying to make you money. I'm awful at sports betting. Help me lose money on your app by letting it work better.
You're not asking for free bets. You're not asking for refunds. You just want to be able to get down on things here. I guess, Adam, as we kind of close things out here, we're talking about Vegas and whatever. I guess one thing we can say, and this was something we reported on a couple of months ago, but if you do visit Vegas, whenever you feel comfortable enough to travel again, you're going to be walking up and down the strip, and you're going to have very limited options as to where you can bet, because William Hill has now taken over pretty much the whole strip when it comes to sports betting. If you are not betting at an MGM shop, you're pretty much betting at William Hill these days, as they have gone in. They've taken over all of the CG books. They have taken over a good bit of the Caesars books as it sits right now as well. And so we keep talking about how Nevada feels like it's falling behind, and how all of these other states, myriad of options, great working apps, tons of bonuses and promotions, yada, yada, yada. And here's yet another thing that makes Nevada a little bit less of a appealing place to come and place your wagers, because now your options have really been chopped down a pretty significant amount.
Well, I mean, to add just some flesh to those bones, of course, we know that William Hill bought out CG, and through the El Dorado deal ends up with most of the Caesars Sportsbook, including Caesars itself. What I think needs to be focused on with this is less competition, less incentive to have competitive prices.
Exactly.
And when we look at William Hill in particular, I'm not here to further the narrative that some out there on Twitter have that is all anti-William Hill. I will tell you that the idea that there is more limiting that goes on at certain books than others is true. And when you look at taking fewer books and making fewer books available, then that becomes a more significant thing, because if you happen to be limited at a certain place and that place now owns a dozen sports books in town, then you just have less places to legally get your action down in a city where the app technology is already woefully behind everywhere else. So just to give one little bit of sunshine though, Matt, you and I have talked about it. We talked about it on this podcast that William Hill was the one place that was offering a handful of promotions and bonuses to try to bring people in and acquire customers. In Nevada, I was able to take advantage of one of those bonuses. So if they're willing to go more to that end, yeah, there could be a positive outcome that comes out of this. But they also are a book that has made no secret of a retail-heavy strategy throughout the country. So it's not a book that I see coming in and taking over a bunch of places in Nevada and think, oh, good, the tech's going to get better.
Yeah. No doubt about that. I mean, you can just tell it, these places that they've taken over. I mean, that is a big, beautiful book over there at the Venetian Palazzo that they now have, can stake claim to. And like you mentioned, Caesar's Palace. I mean, literally, Caesar's Palace is a massive sports book that they have built in there, is now going to be run by them as well. Circa is on the way. We will see, that will be launching in October. They will be up and running over there, the biggest sports book in the world. Can they make some real penetration? Will we see that happen in some of these other states as well? We know that they're already in Colorado looking at eyeing some of the East Coast states as well. So the race is still on, but man, competition is good, and getting fewer people involved here in Nevada is never a good thing, especially for folks like you and I, Mr. Candy. But
there you go.
Yeah, we'll hope one day. Just give me a DraftKings, give me a FanDuel, give me a PointsBet. Someone give me
Penn National.
Give Dustin an app. Just give Dustin an app.
Penn National owns Tropicana or operates Tropicana
Yeah.
still too, so maybe you'll get a Barstool Sports.
Hey, listen, if the app works, consider me a stoolie. All right, if the app works, consider
tell
me
the sound department to cut that one.
just give me a working app, man. Just give me a menu. Oh boy. As always, guys, we are over on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, and Google Podcasts. Please go in, give us a subscribe, rate, review, give us a little 5-star up there, and really do appreciate you guys listening. We have gotten some really great feedback from all of this. And again, if you're out there and you're listening and you have a story that you'd like us to talk about or cover, hit us up on Twitter. We're reading all of that stuff, and we certainly take it all to heart. So please do that. If you want to follow Adam on the Twitter machine, at Adam Candy, that is 2 E's, no Y, at Dustin Gauker, Gouker, and at Matt Brown M2. If you want to follow me, no real reason to do that. For Adam, for Dustin, I'm Matt. Talk to you guys next week.